Hello and welcome to week 27 of the 𝘭𝑪 Weekly podcast. And I have with me, as you'd imagine, some gameplay expertise. And we'll start off with Josh. Hello, Josh.
Yeah, good to be here. Thanks for having me, Ben. I'm not sure I'd necessarily put myself down as expertise, but we'll see how we go. We'll see how we go. How are you doing?
In certain areas. Yeah, I'm good, thanks. All the better for having a low-driven playstyle to discuss, which we'll be doing plenty of on this episode, with, the real expertise on this podcast, which is the man behind the guide. We've had him on plenty of times. It's good to have him back. It's Taz. Hello, Taz.
Thanks for having me. I'm good. Really looking forward to catching up. It's been a while.
Yeah, it has been a while. So let us dive in, and I think we'll just get straight into it. Let's talk about Low Driven. We talked a bit about this on the supporter content podcast this week in terms of the players we've had, things like that. But let's start first of all, just I guess with a rough explanation, Josh, just basics. What is it? How does it work? And I guess how do you trigger it?
So it's shooting the ball low into the net. That's the idea behind the playstyle. Now, it's a mechanic that's been in the game for a long time. I actually can't remember when they first introduced it as a concept. You used to have to trigger it with a modifier, which I now
double tap,
also
wasn't it?
Can't remember. Yeah, it was double tap, wasn't it? And then up until I think 2 years ago, maybe it was just last year, you could trigger it by hitting a shot with under 40% power, I want to say, was something like that. And essentially, it just was a way to shoot the ball low, but also kind of hard. It wasn't something that people really talked a lot about. And then I think this year specifically, it's something I've been using low drivens for a long time this year. Like, they've been very, very good inside the box. They seem to kind of break keepers, whether you're going straight at them, especially if they don't have saves with feet trait. And it can also be good for kind of like tucking it into a far corner when you're kind of running in one-on-one and you can just like roll it past them. However, they've now made a playstyle to make it even better. And I think this is kind of more to help people who aren't using precision shooting, because I do think that Low Driven was more of a precision shooter's tool than a person who uses the AI to shoot. It's new, it's brand new, like it's only going on new players. You can add it with evolutions, but it's not been retroactively added to anybody. And yeah, to trigger it, you literally just need to tap shoot, and it is a tap. It's not something that you can hold for any length of time. You'd be surprised how quickly your power bar goes up. So when you're in and around the box, a quick tap of it, and you'll get that kind of animation. Obviously, with the way that playstyles work, they will go more accurate and more fast and shoot it quicker. Like the animation will go more quickly. We'll just try and make all of the grammatical errors we can. Something that people have, and I have it, especially with passing, is that thing of like when you want to really power something through a gap or to try and kind of finish it with any sort of power, you want to hold on to shoot longer. But as I said on the content pod, actually, the more you hold shoot, I would just think more about you putting more loft on the ball rather than necessarily you're hitting it that much harder. With low driven now, that's kind of really obvious to see because you can tap it and still get some really fast shot. I mean, I was using 𝗪𝗏 last night, and the speed with which he can hit those low driven shots is absolutely astounding, especially considering you don't put any power on it. So I wouldn't worry about it, and if you're struggling to get it to kind of trigger, then yeah, just tap it, and you should see the results of that.
Yeah, I was going to say, while you're sort of learning to use it, if it's not something you've really used, it probably is worth picking up one of the low-driven Playstyle Plus players, just so you can see it ping on as you do it. And 𝗪𝗏, he's only like 60k, and 𝗵𝗪𝘀, I think, is like 30 maybe. So there are some cheap options for you if you want to give it a try and get that kind of clear feedback that you're actually doing it. We mentioned a bit more about this on the content pod this week. But let us then come to you, Taz. Anything to kind of add about the execution of the shot? Something that, I don't know, people need to be aware of. I guess body position is kind of important maybe, but we can talk more about kind of scenarios. But is there anything you'd kind of add based on what Josh has said?
More like a follow-up, that I would also say that it can feel like a little bit counterintuitive that now with a low-driven short playstyle, and you're a little bit further away, the playstyle enables you also to use low drivens on a little bit more of a further range, basically. And then it feels odd that you don't, like, you always have this kind of feeling that you need to power up more to make it work. But so this is very counterintuitive, and I think this is going to take a while until your brain basically learned that you can now just still keep it just slightly tapped the shooting button, and it still will be a powerful shot.
Yeah, I think it's really true. And then classic, of course, of the community to kind of say this new thing is overpowered because people obviously benefit in terms of their kind of social media reach and all that kind of stuff. If they say something is overpowered,
how cynical
it gets
of
more
you.
attention. Well, you know, it will be in the pod YouTube thumbnail, of course, but it is pretty effective, Taz. Like, it is something that people should be giving a try. Like, it isn't something to just be like, oh, it's just kind of a novelty.
Yeah, I mean, as Josh, I think, pointed out, the low driven shots were already good before the playstyle. So there was already a spot on situations, scenarios when it was worth going for it without the playstyle, and still is. And now you add another layer of the way how you can use it, like a little bit further away, for example. And also what I think people should keep in mind, and maybe we'll talk about later on in this episode about this as well. Right now, we don't have anything how we can improve the accuracy or like the effectiveness of regular driven shots. And you have things like the finesse shot, you have power shots, like chip shots, all those kind of niche scenarios. For the finesse shot, like if you want to set up a finesse shot, for example, you will need specific angles where they work the best. And they might be different in comparison to driven shots. But now we have a tool, like we have certain players that have the potential of this play style to then have another boost to it. And there are situations when it doesn't really matter if it's a low driven or a driven shot, for example. And now when you have players that have the low driven shot play style, you can get this kind of extra boost on your finish. So this is something to consider, that this now with the playstyle, you have a way of, in a situation when it doesn't matter if you want to just go for driven shot, no matter if it's a normal driven shot or a low driven shot. With a low driven shot, now you have this extra boost on it. And I already noticed that in comparison to, like, for example, when I have pressure from the opponent, if I would go for a normal driven shot, usually I would expect a poor finish in a way that it is either too central or too wide. But now I have a player that has the low driven shot playstyle, and I can squeeze out these extra percent on my finish, and I get this increase in accuracy and power and still score, even though I would say or argue with a normal driven shot, there would be a high chance of missing that goal opportunity.
Yeah, I really agree with that. There was, I guess, certain situations, well, there are a lot of situations actually where finesse isn't going to be a goal, basically, because the angle that you're facing the goal at doesn't allow you to kind of get any bend on the shot, really, and it's just going to give the keeper an opportunity to save it. I'm thinking particularly kind of going near post when you're quite central in the penalty area, and in those situations it's been really effective for just taking a touch towards the post essentially, and then hitting that low driven shot almost sort of straight, like directly in line towards the goal with the post, but obviously just inside the post. So I think that's a great situation to use it in, and you can do it from, you know, the kind of the edge of the penalty box pretty much, or not necessarily outside it. It's not particularly effective from that distance. Can work, I guess, especially if you time it, but just inside the box it seems pretty consistent, kind of tucking into the sort of near post corner. So that's been really good. I just wonder, Josh, have you found any particularly helpful situations that you're using it in?
It's a bit more nuanced, I think, for me, because I was using it so much before. It's about, like, has the playstyle offered anything extra? And
well, to be fair, I would say a lot of people may not have been, especially if they're using assisted shooting, may not have been using low-driven shots at all. So situations where you are using low-drivens at all are probably helpful for people.
Anywhere in the box, when there's multiple factors to it, right? Because you don't have to hold shoot for long, you can execute it like a little bit quicker, that like frame earlier than you would do if you were trying to hold to get more power on it. So it helps to get those quicker shots off earlier. When somebody's moving their keeper, for some reason, I find it far easier to roll it into the opposite corner than to like try and power it into the opposite corner. And again, it might be that thing that it executes that little bit quicker. And because it's low to the ground, it's further for the goalkeeper to have to dive. So even if they can try and get close to it. And even like when you're quite close to the keeper, especially in one-on-one situations, and especially if you know that their keeper doesn't have saves with feet trait, you can just hit it fairly at them and it will go through them, because as long as it doesn't go at one of their standing legs, they aren't quick enough to move their feet. They're not going to get down quick enough to make the save. So it's more, it is better for closer in. Definitely, like when you're at maybe a slight angle, and as has been said, if you can't maneuver it onto a strong foot to bend it round a keeper, I think a lot of people like just hitting it near post, but that low driven across the keeper is really powerful. Not only because the keeper doesn't ever catch it. I've not hit a low driven across the keeper where they've gone down and like held the ball. It's usually where they've pushed it back out. And so you know what the kind of jam is like in the box. If it's going for you, then you'll just have a player on the end of it to tap it into an empty net. So in terms of the difference, if you were using it before, it's just you can do it from slightly further out now. Like, you can start doing it more from when you reach the edge of the box than feeling like you have to be in the box. I wouldn't be going any further than that personally. So yeah, it's one of those for in and around the box when you're going to have to get your shot off quickly. And if you're on precision, if you can get that aim for the far corner correct, they're almost impossible to save.
Yeah, I really agree. Also, first time, they're really good as well. Just like a little tap. And actually, your point about them executing the shot quicker, not only are they executing the shot quicker because you don't have to hold the button as long, but it's also a perk of the playstyle is the ability to take the shots quicker. So that is very good to know. Anything to add, Taz, in terms of situations you're finding it helpful?
Yeah, I have something like an idea. I'm still experimenting with it a bit, if it's actually a thing in a way. If it's consistent, which getting into the spot for low driven, I think that the technical playstyle can be something to really combine it quite well with. I was playing Musiala, for example, in the last weekend league and also in Rivals, and I had the feeling that usually the problem for me with the technical is it's not as easy anymore, like in FC25, to really use technical, I feel like. And sometimes you end up in a situation inside the box with technical, you get in a good spot, then you have problems setting up a good finishing spot because you don't have really the time to either set up a finesse or then just a regular driven shot. And as you guys just explained, the low driven playstyle helps to get the low driven shots faster off. Not only because you don't have to press as long, but also the execution of the shot itself is faster. So I feel like this can help you, like you use the technical to get inside the box into just a niche spot to find a finishing way. And then you just utilize then the low driven shot playstyle to just get off a shot really quickly. And then if you have like a player like Musiala, who's also have like 5-star weak foot, you're really flexible of creating those spots. But as I said, I'm still experimenting with it if it's actually really consistent also against very skilled players, because they can get the tight really space, like the space really tight in the box.
Well, I do feel like as well, like you can take shots on with low driven when the ball's quite close to your feet almost. Whereas with finesse, they kind of want to move the ball out of their body a bit more to take the shot on. So I guess, yeah, that adds to the argument that this is a good shot type to take if you don't have a lot of time. And I think that is very true. Is there anything before we move on from low driven anyone wants to mention? I guess one thing might be, have we found any stats impacting it especially? I think most players have very good shooting who have it, so it's quite hard to tell. But you got to assume, I guess, that finishing, composure, shot power are the key determining factors in how good the shot is, aside from the playstyle itself. Any other thoughts?
My only thing would be, don't buy too heavily into the hype of the community around it. Is it overpowered? Yeah. It's something I've used a lot. It's been overpowered in the game. And if you haven't been using it before, it's not more over. I don't feel like it's that much more overpowered with the playstyle than it was before. So I wouldn't be like tearing up all of your plans and completely changing your playstyle. Just think about more of it as adding a tool to your arsenal in terms of how you're going to get the ball into the back of the net than necessarily like, I think it's very easy to see something's OP and then only ever do that. Do you know what? Travellas from 30 yards are still pretty OP. So, you can still do those things, but I think it's just one of those things. Like if you are someone who wants to go more meta, because I think they look lovely as finishes. I think they look kind of like some finishes in real life, and it's very satisfying to do, especially when you can. I actually like not having the playstyle because you get that roll animation more. Whereas I think with the playstyle, they tend to hit it with a bit too much power to get that feel of that you've just
it does look a bit funny sometimes, doesn't it?
Yeah. But I think if you're going down the meta route, definitely practice with it because it does take a bit of getting used to, but don't make it your entire game because whilst it's good, I don't think it will still be seen as completely overpowered in, say, 2 weeks' time. I also wonder if we'll see 𝘵𝗍𝘳 because I noticed him being taken out of teams. I was coming up against him less and less. I wonder if we'll see him now coming back with an absolute vengeance because he's got saves with feet plus as a play style.
Yeah, it's interesting actually, the number of goalkeepers who have the saves with feet and far reach, even as regular playstyles, that list isn't particularly big at all. So I could definitely see that. And it'll be interesting to see if they do release more goalkeepers in the near future, certainly with saves with feet, to kind of combat that a little bit. The other thing I was just going to add is I have used a few players with the regular low driven, and I think, especially as we have just most of the time 2 playstyle pluses on players, I wonder whether for pacey strikers actually, if the meta might be to have sort of finesse plus and quick step plus or rapid plus, something like that, instead of having the low driven plus, because I think finesse plus is quite a lot stronger than finesse, and I don't know that low driven plus has as big a difference between the low driven plus and the low driven. I am using precision shooting though, and obviously that makes the shots better, so maybe that is partly the reason. Talking of precision shooting, we'll move on to some other things, but I want to chat briefly about that after the break. Hello, and welcome back after the break. Right, before we finish up our chat on load driven, I did want to point people towards Taz, the guide, because you are going to have a guide on load driven, which should be out, when people are listening to this podcast, I think.
Yeah, that's right. And we will cover like what we just explained, like all the different scenarios, explaining how to utilize the playstyle and also how to really get used to it in the different spots and how to train it.
Yeah, and presumably with video and all that sort of stuff, which is good. And actually, you've very kindly given us a code, FootWeekly25, which gives people 25% off, which is an exclusive discount, especially for us, I believe.
That's right. We rarely do this, but it worked out pretty well last time, so we do it again.
Yeah, I mean, I know a lot of people who signed up before were saying that they thought it was great value, and you get access to guides throughout the cycle. And the link to do that and information that you'll need is in the description of this podcast. Right, let's talk just a little more about shooting, I guess, and specifically assisted versus precision. Precision, of course, being a more manual approach to shooting. We have to aim the shots, but it does improve the shooting or the shot quality, I guess. Before, low drivens were something that mainly people with precision shooting were doing, and now it's open to assisted shooters too. And I guess that does devalue precision shooting again, Josh?
Yeah, I think that it's another thing that kind of closes the gap between the kind of auto shooting where you can aim at the corner flag and the game will put it in the top corner for you, and actually having to aim. And I think that's sad. I think we need to move towards more manual control across the board, to be honest. People are clearly enjoying, or have enjoyed, I think that's maybe waning a little now, the change to the gameplay that made defending more manual, which meant we were getting more goals every game. There was less kind of defensive AI. Now, what's consequently happened is everyone's found the formation that gives you the most defensive AI help, which is the 4-2-1-3, and that's what they're using. But for me, I think that it's it's a bit frustrating to have a playstyle added that feels far more about letting people who can't be bothered to learn to aim play than rewarding people who are, trying to play the game, in my opinion, properly. But maybe that's a bit too on my high horse banging a, drum that nobody needs to hear.
Yeah, I mean, it's true, I think. Taz, I don't know what you think about this, but there were a lot of people who just didn't think low drivens were ever worth doing before these playstyles came along because they didn't use precision and they frankly weren't that good. But with precision, they were a consistent way of scoring. So it does take something away, I think, from people who are trying to play the game with a bit more skill. Sounds a bit harsh, but true.
Yeah, I understand the point. Actually, I haven't thought about it that much, but I totally get what you were saying. I'm using precision shooting since 𝘵𝘂24, and I was always an advocate of it, that I thought it's worth it. Now it seems like in 𝘵𝘂25, it really took over. I would be really curious, by the way, how the distribution is of how many people actually use it. Because if you, in this setting here, it feels like everybody is using it and it's so popular now. But I still think it's, if you look at the whole player base, probably maybe 5 to 10%, I would guess, because assisted is just the normal default value. But anyways, for me, I have to say, overall, I just mainly look at myself, and I'm just super happy with how I am utilizing precision shooting and how I engage with the game in that aspect. And I don't actually care that much about what other people are doing with assisted or not, and I feel like I have an advantage by using precision shooting, and that's fine and enough for me. And maybe it gets a little bit minimized with the addition of the playstyle, but I don't feel like it's a lot of difference, to be honest.
Yeah, I mean, I agree that I don't think it makes it not worth using or anything like that, for sure. And it's been interesting, Josh. I think more people have come round to it, even though I think some have said post-patch, maybe it hasn't been so effective, because actually a lot of the pros have been forced to use it. Well, they've all been forced to use it. And you see #House, for example, all saying actually people should pick up and learn it because actually it does make your shooting much more effective.
Yeah, it's, sometimes change needs to be forced upon people. I mean, first-time power shots were overpowered last year. Maybe not totally to the extent they were this year, but they were pretty supreme, and that just because it never got picked up at a high level, it just never became part of what people did. And then the beginning of this year, it was suddenly this massive issue and got patched, even though I honestly think if you went back to last year and started doing first time power shots, you go, God, they were broken last year as well. So yeah, it's one of those things that I think people have kind of got on board with. I knew that the pros would end up enjoying it because as I think I mentioned last year, I gave it to 2 pros and said, just please try it for 5 games. It'll feel weird, but you'll get used to it. And within 2.5 games, they were going, this is unbelievable. I can't believe I've not been using this. Because guess what? They've got the skill to aim in the right direction. And yeah, there's going to be times where your muscle memory is wrong and you're going to aim in a weird direction. There are still times where my finger will slip off the stick and so my shot will go to a corner flag, but it's not, I just think there are more scenarios in which I get an advantage using it than not using it, and I just hope that advantage kind of stays. I do. I'm not having a go at the players, by the way, who aren't using it. Maybe that came across in my previous answer. It's more just I think I would like to see a move more towards manual, and not necessarily just manual. I do think it needs to be an accessible game as well, and so you've got to allow people the ability to play the game with some help, just that those that are playing it with less help get an advantage for doing so. And I would agree with Taz. I still think that advantage is there.
Yeah, it's a funny one, isn't it? Because obviously people are being quite precise in the game, controlling their players' movement. So there isn't really a reason why they shouldn't be able to, do a precision shot effectively. And actually, if you can take a power shot, then you can take a precision shot, because
if you can dodge a wrench, you can dodge a ball.
Exactly, you can dodge a ball. So if people want to pick it up, start learning it, I would still definitely recommend it. And the main thing I always say is it's a lot more fun, and not only is it rewarding, but you get less frustrated with shooting, in my opinion. once you start using precision. Anyway, let's move on to something a little bit different. Hugh wrote in and said, now that there are 6 playstyles in every category except for passing, do you think EA will add another playstyle? And if so, what would you like to see added? And it's worth noting that there is space within the passing section, but you could probably move 𝗃𝗏𝗯 into passing, which would open up a spot in physical, or you could move 𝗧lair into passing to open up a spot in dribbling. You could move, I guess, dead ball into passing to open up a spot in shooting. So I think you could pretty much come up with a playstyle thing into any of these. And I guess this comes to the question, what would you like to see added to FC 26, I guess, in terms of playstyles? Let's start with you, Josh, because I think Taz has about 50 to go through.
Yeah, so I've got a few ideas on this. Firstly, I'm going to create a second space in the list and just bin off 𝗃𝗏𝗯 entirely. Like, it shouldn't be in the game. Get rid of it. You don't see it that often in real life games, and when it does happen, it's absolutely like mind blowing that someone's been able to pull it off. It's either got to be nerfed or just get rid of it. So I would then move probably rapid down into physical, 𝗧lair up into passing, and I want to split press proven, because we have bruiser, which allows you to win the ball physically, but the playstyle that allows you to hold on to the ball in a physical battle is press proven. But there's no playstyle that allows you to just dribble tightly with the ball, because that's also press proven. And I feel like those two things are very different. When we spoke about it pre-pod, Taz mentioned 𝗵𝗇, and he's like the perfect example. 𝗵𝗇 didn't need to be strong in a physical battle to get away from somebody, because he could just jink round them really quickly because he had incredible tight ball control. And you might go, well, technical's there, but that's more for technical dribble than just a normal dribbling. So for me, I would split those out into kind of like strength dribble. I don't know what you would call that, but where you can maintain control of the ball under intense physical pressure.
It's like shielding, isn't it? Really?
Yeah, or just keep it as press proven. Just keep the name press proven, but take the just the tighter dribbling out and create a messy dribbling playstyle. And I think that's where I'd create one, just because I don't think there is really a playstyle outside of press proven that just does tight left stick dribbling, and I think we there should be one.
Yeah, interestingly, actually, my thought was also around dribbling. I think we could potentially look at sort of effort touches, and I don't know if you ever see clips of Maradona playing, actually 𝗵𝗇 as well. They often use what the game calls effort touches quite a lot, so little knocks round players, essentially, rather than sort of tight dribbling. I know, obviously, they both did tight dribbling as well, but those kinds of little scoops past players or knock-ons, that sort of thing, in the game are there, but you do them manually and they can often be a bit clunky. They're actually quite good before the patch because dribbling was a lot worse, but now dribbling is very good. They don't have so much of a use case, so potential to make those stronger with a playstyle, so you can do those kinds of little like knocks past players. You still have to trigger it manually, I guess, but maybe they would be smarter contextually when you did them. There'd be less opportunity for a defender to get in there because your player maybe moves with the ball better. Those sorts of things, I think, could be quite fun to add. And then, Taz, we'll move on to you. What's your number one ranked suggestion?
I would like to add to what you just said, because I actually like the idea. Because I thought about it. Effort dribble touch is a very interesting mechanic. I think in theory it allows you to dribble in a way which would be super OP, but it never really took off. And I think it's way too hard to get into your game. And I think one of the reasons is that if you go for a too drastic direction change with the effort dribble touch, you get penalized quite heavily, which makes it very hard for you as the player to find the right balance of it and to find the right spots for it. Because as soon as you use it in the wrong spot, you're punished heavily. And I think this might be something that they can address with the playstyle, that, for example, if you change direction with the effort dribble touch too much and you have the playstyle that you just described, maybe you get really fast direction changes or slick animations because of it. So you get a wider range of using or utilizing the effort dribble touch. And I think if a player has this kind of playstyle, this could help quite a lot to actually make effort dribble touches a thing. Maybe very comparable to the low driven shot now, which it's already in the game and it's still, there are spots for it, but most of the player base is not really aware of it, that it's actually useful. And then they start using the effort dribble touch with the new playstyle and notice, this is a really cool mechanic, and it maybe takes off like this.
Yeah. And it's true that I think anything that has a playstyle connected to the mechanic is something that just people are more aware of. So it's kind of a nice way to get people learning things, I suppose. Nice. And so I'm happy to be supported in my suggestions, but what's yours?
Yeah, so I have different ideas when it comes to now, like also still on the dribbling ball control area. We already talked about 𝘵ci, and I think something like this way of agile way of getting around the opponent, boosting this to make him press proven, like to make the players press proven. I think this would be really cool. Or also something like sticky feet or glue dribbler, a player which is really hard to get off the ball because he might have either a fast reaction time or a second chance to get to the ball. Sounds totally OP. I understand that. Or also something which, if you think how you lose the ball, sometimes it's also because your player is losing balance. And maybe there could be also a way of enabling a player to recover faster. For example, also _𝘵ci is someone who comes to mind here. There are situations back in this prime in La Liga, players try, or like defensive players try to get him off the ball, and he was already like with 1 feet or like with 1 knee on the ground, and he was still able to maintain ball possession in those situations, or to still recover it and then follow on with his dribbling. And I think this would be also a really cool thing. And I think this all comes together in this very agile way of enabling a new dribbling technique or dribbling style in the game, where it's very hard to get you off the ball and your player keeps the balance in a lot of those situations, which might be very overpowered, but something which is missing in the game right now. When we get rid of the limitation of saying like we need to have 6 playstyles in every category, right now there's a spot in passing, something which is also in the game, which are lofted or lifted passes that you do at double tapping the passing button, either with ground passes or through passes, for example. Back a couple of years ago, contextually, this was automatically triggered. Now you have to do it manually and only manually. And this, I feel like nobody really uses this as much. It's very niche, and it's very also hard to find the right spots for it. A playstyle could help that it goes back to contextually, for example, to give you this kind of edge that in a tight space, your player identifies the need for playing a lofted pass in that, or lifted pass in that situation, and it automatically dinks the pass in that way over the leg of the opponent who's going to intercept it, for example. So, because I was thinking about what is in the game right now, which is not covered by playstyles. And the last thing maybe that I want to talk about is I feel like there's still room when it comes to finishing or scoring, because I mentioned earlier already, we don't have a playstyle for the driven shots in general. This is the basic mechanic, like the basic mechanic when you just press the shooting button in the game, there's no playstyle which affects this. And I think there could be 2 ways. Either you have a composed finisher, which still has high accuracy when they are under pressure of the opponent, because this is a heavy influence or factor on your quality of finishes. As soon as you have pressure from the opponent onto your side, for example, and you still want to get the shot off, usually you have a high spread in your shot and you will miss the goal more often. So a composed finisher would be more able to deal with it and still get a good shot off. And the other way could be also a little bit similar to what we discussed already with a low driven shot, that with a playstyle your player gets off the shot faster. You could have a playstyle like quickfire, for example, that also allows you to get the normal driven shot off faster. I feel like it's very natural because we already have this for power shots. With the power shot playstyle, your power shot is the execution time is faster. We now have it with a low driven shot. So why not have it just for the regular driven shots that with the playstyle you also get the shots off faster?
I feel like we are maybe in need of some playstyle alterations rather than necessary additions. We kind of mentioned skill moves, and like Trickster should be the skill move playstyle, and it's not. Like it actually like doesn't help you in skill moves really. So having something that I suppose it can't supersede like skill moves, like 4-star skill moves or 5-star skill moves, but the ability to say, okay, you can chain multiple skill moves and keep close control of the ball, or execute them quicker, or exit more precisely, or get an effort touch after executing a skill move, so that you can then take that extra touch to burst away from a player. Because I think skill moves, part of the issue is that you can't really sell players quite as much as you used to be able to. So yeah, I think more refining. I actually think more refining in general of playstyles. I will say I think they got it pretty good this year. I think last year there was times when aerial was massively overpowered. Finesse was more overpowered than it is now. I think it still is quite powerful, but it was more than it is now. Whereas I think this year it's probably been a little, I think the passing playstyles have been more noticeable this year than they were last year, which I kind of like. Quick step and even rapid. I think rapid last year I was a big, like, that was probably my
hater.
Least, I was a big hater. It was my least favorite playstyle. Whereas I actually think they've made it somewhat usable. Obviously, it helps when the speed boost has been quite powerful. Press proven maybe not as powerful as it was last year. I think we're even seeing people use first touch more now, especially that combination of first touch and finesse shot. So, yeah, I think just more refining of what they do. And then, maybe one or two of our suggestions we can add into, because I know we shouldn't be limited by the fact that it'd be very nice if each category had 6, but it would be really nice. I can't imagine if you've got OCD looking at that page is a lot of fun right now.
Yeah, I mean, there are genuine, like, sort of technical, like, UI limitations often on these things. Like, the space is there. It has to be a certain size for people to be able to see it. And so there are maybe only going to be so many unless we start having them in sections so you can't see them all in one place at the same time. So I do kind of think it's likely that if they do anything, it will be adding another one and maybe moving things around a bit. But I agree. I think there's an opportunity to maybe recalibrate things a bit and shift things around, even though generally I think they've been fairly balanced. I mean, Taz, it's been like a year and a half now that we've had playstyles. And I don't know, maybe it's from my perspective as someone who likes to experiment with gameplay elements, but I think it's been a really fun, it's had its balancing issues, but it's been a really fun addition to the game.
Yes, and I think what was also quite noteworthy, we got a new playstyle mid-cycle, like during the game. Yeah. I mean, it's very interesting how the FC franchise develops, I would say, in that aspect, because we already had new player roles in this cycle. Now we have new playstyles. In the past, we already had, like, in a summer update, new skill moves. We have new icons added to or new players, heroes added to the game in the mid-cycle. We already also had this in the past, but I see an overall trend, and I really enjoy it when it happens, because usually you have this kind of peak of new things added to the game, which makes sense on the release of the new version of the new year. But I really like it, like a weekend league or like a week like this, when you have a new playstyle, or like a couple of months ago, you have new player roles that you can try out. You find a new way of engaging with the game, which brings a lot of joy to me. Learning something new and experimenting something new. I like this kind of development, because for EA, it would make more sense, because I think it's very hard for every year to find really new additions to the game. They always have to find something that they can rework, they can refine, or like completely create something new. And now they have something completely new, a new playstyle, and they decided, hey, let's add this during the cycle of the game, which I feel is quite noteworthy.
Yeah, I agree. And I think it's really good for us who play a lot of the cycle because it gives us something fresh and it means the start of a cycle isn't so overloaded. And also, of course, at the start of the cycle, you don't have as many players with playstyles, so it isn't as exciting getting a new one. Okay, let's take a break here and we'll be back to talk about some more things that have been added into the game right after this. Hello, and in this break, a quick reminder that the pod is made possible by supporters. The pod didn't used to be weekly. Yes, Foot Weekly wasn't actually weekly for a time. And then someone suggested setting up the Patreon. And since then, the pod has been weekly. And in fact, it's been twice weekly because there is that supporter episode every single week. So if you'd like to catch that episode and keep the podcast going, it's just £3 a month to do so. And you get loads in return. And there are perks higher than that, including access to the Discord too. So if you're interested and would like to support the podcast, then head over and search Support Foot Weekly. Go to Patreon and it's very easy to sign up. If you are a supporter keeping the podcast going, then a huge thank you for doing so. And if you do consider supporting, a huge thank you too. Right, let's jump back into the pod. Hello and welcome back after the break. So there has been actually, I feel like 2 kind of patches almost in the last week or so, which have changed a few things. So here are some issues addressed. Ground pass was less accurate than intended in situations where the passer and receiver were not under pressure by defenders. And sometimes the ball carrier could have slowed down unintentionally when turning during a dribble performed while sprinting. When passing the ball, the player switches to the receiver did not always occur if the passing animation was interrupted by certain inputs. On rare occasions, players could have entered a state where they continuously committed unintended professional fouls. I mean, maybe that's potential for a playstyle there, perhaps.
I think the no rules friendly really brought that to the fore, because if you weren't pulling people down left, right, and centre, you were playing that game mode wrong.
Yeah, the offside's perhaps even more impactful.
I will say, I don't think it's being used where people expected it to be used as much. Like, I think when we first saw it, people were like, oh, well, this is just going to be so toxic because you're going to be through in the 90th minute and then just get pulled down. And I actually don't really see that often, mainly because that scenario tends not to happen, where it's a last minute chance. I actually think it's being used kind of where it should be used, which is in the middle of the pitch. No, in a transition where, maybe they've broken your line and you just want to make sure that they can't, you go, oh, I'm maybe short on numbers back here. I'll just take the yellow card in the midfielder. And yeah, I know it's a video game. I know it doesn't have to exactly represent real life, but it is very realistic. And it is one of those things where, you've got a couple of get out of jail free cards if you get broken on. And if you are somebody who wants to commit players forward to really try and, break down deep blocks, shall we say, maybe if they've got 4 defenders and then 2 DMs sat in front of them, then it's one of those things that gives you the ability to really press quite high up the pitch, because you've got that, let me just pull them down if they break past me, on a couple of occasions. So I actually think it's been quite a good addition to the game. I've quite enjoyed it.
Yeah, no, I do totally agree with that. I should get on to a couple of the other smaller things as well. So they said they moderately reduced accuracy of fully powered precision lob passes. With this change, we continue towards making precision lob passes behave more authentically, with the goal of lowering their use in kickoff scenarios. And then significantly increased the accuracy of clearance headers. We've seen your feedback around clearance headers. We've increased the accuracy so that you can have more options for quickly getting the ball out of a dangerous situation. I think that's because they kind of nerfed headers, mainly for attacking reasons, but then affected defensive kind of headers out as well. And then in some specific situations, AI defenders did not press the ball carrier as intended. The issue mainly occurred during potential offside scenarios, with the AI defender over-prioritizing the offside line instead of attempting to press an offensive threat. To be clear, addressing this issue is not intended to improve AI defending, them being very clear about this here, across the board. It's to address situations where you would typically expect an AI player to press the ball carrier to begin with. Sometimes incorrect goalkeeper save animations could have occurred when the keeper was trying to save tight angle near post shots. We wanted to make sure we could address this issue before introducing the low driven shot playstyle. And then we come to super subs. So this is a big impact. Well, not a big impact necessarily, but it could be. We'll have to see how it pans out. They're introducing super sub player items into Ultimate Team. These player items will have full chemistry when they're subbed into matches during the second half and beyond. Additionally, following the same activation conditions, so subbed on in the second half or beyond, role familiarity at the role plus level will be increased to role plus plus. Just keep in mind that these player items need to be subbed on in their primary or alternative positions in order to get the chemistry and role familiarity effects. Yeah, so that could change the dynamic for subs a bit. Although, I don't know, it's interesting to see how much of an impact this has. Josh maybe has less impact at this stage of the cycle.
Yeah, it will be interesting to see. I mean, like, subs is something we've actually advocated a lot for here, that I think they make enough of a difference anyway. I'm not sure we needed like a card type, and how's that gonna be like seen in game? Are they gonna have two separate stats where it's like the stats if you start them and the stats if they come off the bench? Can you even start them if they're a super sub card type? Like, I don't know, it's an odd one for me that I'm a little bit trepidatious of. Maybe just use your subs anyway between now and then, and you'll think they're super,
Yeah, it's an interesting one. I mean, maybe they'll just release like an evolution, which is quite open. You can just put players into it and then it will give them that benefit. Which, if they do that, it's really interesting for like off-league players, I guess, because they'll be getting full chem when they get subbed on. So, there's a potential kind of good value proposition to tap into there, potentially.
But do we think that will make that much of a difference? Do you think full chem is really that much of like a grabber that it's going to make any difference?
I don't know. Yeah, it feels so niche, and it was also complicating the game, I think, unnecessarily in a way, I think, for people. What do you think, Taz? Do you think it will make a significant difference? Because also the role familiarity is only going plus to plus plus, so it's not like adding a plus plus to a regular role player.
I think it's something that you always have in the back of your mind, at least for me, when it comes to bringing players on. At least I am aware, the players don't get the chemistry boost, or like they don't have chemistry. So now I think it makes a difference. If you think about it, that you have a player on the bench, and like if you think like, most noticeable for me is always like the missing pace boost, for example, especially if you bring in players in later stages of the game. It can help even more if you have faster players with a full stamina bar, so they can really excel with a high pace. And then you always have to keep in mind, well, they don't get the chemistry boost if they have a chemistry style that boosts pace. And usually that's why I have bench players that have high pace attributes. So I don't need the chemistry boost on that, or the chemistry style boost on that. So I think this can help. And I agree. Now, when I think more about it, I think they will make an Evo for it. Like maybe a few times. So you can, at the beginning, I will say that you will have one super sub. I think this makes more sense also in the kind of the storytelling, that I think super sub is a term that really took off when For Champions was introduced in FIFA 17. So now there was a need of someone to bring in, and you all, like, at least in the German community, like the term super sub really got popular, that this is my super sub, like this is the guy that I'm bringing in. And that's why I think they'll make it at the beginning at least very limited, and I think they will do it with an Evo. That makes the most sense for me.
Yeah, that makes sense. Before we wrap up, actually, Taz, do you have a mechanic or something that you've been finding effective recently, perhaps you want to tell the listeners about, that they could try?
Like something which I feel like is a complete game changer. It's a really advanced mechanic. But for me, it's like you can play a different game if you know how to use it. It's called the Flare Nutmeg Pass. And it builds up on the Flare Nutmeg, which you do by pressing L1 plus R1 and then flicking the right stick. And you can do this in different directions, like 360 degree. But there's a specific one that you do 90 degree. There's a specific animation that you get with the Flare Nutmeg. And this animation you can cancel into a pass. So what you do is you do the 90 degree Flare Nutmeg. And then while the player is pulling back the ball, you press the passing button. And that's so broken because in specific situations, when the opponent's defender is running back to cover you while you're running towards the goal, you can stop on the spot, pull the ball back a little bit, and turn a little bit to the inside to play a pass to your teammate to the side, which makes it so hard for the defender to defend, because they have to on the one side, cover your potential running through towards the goal, but at the same time, they notice that there is a teammate to the side, but they can't really cover that off because they have to respect you just running through. So there is no really other way in the game how you can really force this 50-50 to the opponent, because everything else is going to take much longer time. And therefore, if you know this move, it enables you to create chances in a way that if you don't know this move, you cannot do it like this. And that's why this is a huge game changer for me. And if you are not able to follow this, we have also obviously a lesson on the Get Plus where I explain it in more detail.
Yeah, nicely done. And of course, code 𝘬𝑚𝑒𝑒𝑒𝑘𝑙𝑦 25 for 25% off. There we go. But yeah, actually, it's worth noting that the 𝘬𝑛utmeg, which isn't really so much of a nutmeg as a kind of a cut-in move, is actually really good for cutting in as well. So you don't have to necessarily do the cancel in the pass to get some effectiveness.
Yeah, even just doing it and passing out of that animation, like without the cancel, is really powerful. Like it's a great way to manipulate the ball around.
Yeah. That's a good point. And I think on that, we are ready to wrap up. And yeah, thank you very much, Taz, for joining us on this podcast. It's been great to have your expertise.
Yeah, it was a lot of fun to talking about the different aspects of the playstyles.
Yeah. Well, thanks for not sharing all of them on this podcast. That would have taken too long, but maybe we'll have you back for more. And also, actually, listeners, do send in your suggestions all the usual ways and any questions you might have. Thank you very much as well, Josh.
Thanks for having me, Ben. It's always a fun time to talk about something new in the game. So it's nice to have something there in terms of gameplay. It'd be interesting to see how the ground passing change takes effect, if it's really noticeable or not. So yeah, I'm sure we'll talk about that next week.
Yeah, indeed. And thank you very much to all you listeners tuning in via the various different podcast platforms, YouTube, etc. And a reminder, you can subscribe via all those different things. And of course, if you would like an extra podcast every single week, you can become a supporter. It's just £3 a month for a bonus podcast episode this week. That'd be the content podcast. So yeah, check that out over on Patreon. Just search support 𝘬𝑚𝑒𝑒𝑘𝑙𝑦 or follow the link in the description. If you are a supporter of the pod, a huge thank you for keeping the podcast going. And a big thank you too to those icon patrons: Dave B, Darren W, Hugh J, Rob W, Brent P, Ralph, Josh R, Brian, Michael B, Adam R, 𝘬𝘂𝑚𝑒𝑒𝑘𝑙𝑦, Make B, Michael H, Andrew P, Arian B, Rob S, Michael K, Neil P, Jake S, Tom B, Alex M, Alan G, Lee A, Chris G, Mark M, Dom P, Rob P, Roger D, Dan W, Waterman, Also Ran, and 𝗫𝑚𝑒𝑒𝑘𝑙𝑦. Plus a special thanks to Luke M, Dave B, Hugh J, Tom M, Darren W, and Pato Foot for advice and production assistance. Before I leave you, just one more thing to add though. Ultimate Team is a bit like life really. It has its many ups and downs. If you're having a few more downs than ups in real life in these more difficult times, then please don't feel that you're alone or need to struggle on without taking action. If you go to 𝘭𝘪𝑒𝑐𝑎𝑙𝑚𝑧one.net, there's loads of resources, advice, support, or even just a friendly chat for anyone who needs it. If it sounds like it could help you, then head over to 𝘭𝘪𝑒𝑐𝑎𝑙𝑚𝑧one.net. And for now, have a good one, and I'll catch you on the next podcast.